Anyway, so groundwork's been laid. All I can really do is reinforce the points that have been made and maybe give an energy sort of slant to those, and maybe make it a bit more personal, although I think Bridget's sort of stuff was spot on and very difficult to improve upon. So, what is UKERC? UKERC is a programme that's been in existence for 13 years. It exists to try and draw together whole systems energy research, really trying to kind of fill the gaps that sit between the various disciplines. So bringing together the engineers and the social scientists, so the economists, the psychologists, bring these people together to kind of address particular questions that are of interest to policymakers, and trying to sort of build the evidence base. Now, we talked about the evidence base earlier on and what that really means, and it's kind of very challenging because typically the evidence base is incredibly dull. You know, when you aren't actually coming up with something which summarises all of the information that's available, it's not going to have a nice throwaway message. It's not going to have a nice soundbite. It's going to be very scientific, very difficult to engage with. But someone has to do that because policymakers need something to be basing their decisions upon, which is not one person's excitable opinion. And we're never going to get a single voice. All of the academics will have different ways of interpreting their information. We can't never hope to get that, but what we can do is try and provide as close to that as we can get, pick out a broad message, a broad benefit, something that the policymakers can engage with. And that's really what UKERC's been doing for the last 13 years. I mean, this is the third phase that we're in, so we're either doing something very, very badly in the sense we haven't solved the problem yet, or we're doing something right because we've had 3 phases, which is pretty much unheard of from the research councils. Over those 13 years, we've obviously engaged with most of the ministries, DTI as was, BEAR as was, DEC as was, see a trend here, now BAYS, sort of DEFRA, DFID, Ofgem, National Infrastructure Commission, Treasury, Post, Go Science, and the Scottish Government and the Welsh Assembly. I mean, we've dealt with all of these organisations over our time, trying to kind of get them to use the best evidence available. We also facilitate involvement in ERA on behalf of the kind of UKERC, or UK research community. Now, ERA is the European Energy Research Alliance. Its objective is to try and sort of draw upon the best evidence available, the best research available, and sort of coordinate and align research kind of alliances and criteria and programmes across Europe for a single goal. Now, ERA sits in the middle of the member states who want to do their own research, and the EU that wants to pay for as little as possible, which is all perfectly understandable. And we try and sort of deal with the policymakers from both of those positions as well. So really what I'm going to go talk through here is really drawing upon that sort of information and those sort of experiences over 13 years. So, first off, again, this has probably been covered, but why are we engaging at all? Now, we've heard about the impact agenda. It is the expectations of the funders. In most cases, people are funded by the research councils to some degree, or one of the kind of funding agencies, whether that be the kind of the English one, the Welsh one, the Scottish one. And there's an expectation that sort of there'll be value coming out of your research more than just the papers. And that the impact agenda is essentially what drives people out to do that. Great. Sometimes there's a need to go out there and engage with policymakers because they have information that you need to do decent research, and they're kind of holding on to it very, very tightly. Sometimes it's you need to get the right stakeholders in the room to make sure your research is better informed. Again, perfectly valid. I think that Bridget talked about this. Sometimes you get the call. You're lying in bed at night and the phone rings and it is the government asking for your opinion. And who are you not to stand up and say, rise to that challenge and sort of answer that question? Yes, of course you are. I mean, it's a sort of an expectation. Provide that expertise, which the taxpayer has mostly paid for. Again, the other one, potentially personal ambition. Now, I mean, if you're going to move on in your career, and obviously I see a lot of enthusiastic young sort of people in the room today, who you've got to be getting those connections. You've got to be building that network. You obviously can do that within science, but obviously the policymakers is the other way of doing that. So sometimes it's just to get your name out there, to get kind of people to realise that you're doing important stuff, and sometimes just to create value with your research. It can sometimes be very difficult to sort of have spent your career in something and not see anything happen from it. I mean, I spent a lot of time in fuel cells before I moved into this. I saw probably 2 cycles of ups and downs. Nothing ever changed. so I went into finance. Nothing changed, so I went into policy. So really, I mean, that's it. Personal ambition is probably a good one. So why? Why are we doing it? Again, you're maybe trying to get more funding. Policymakers, worst place to go, but equally, if you do a good job in front of the policymakers, then the research councils will probably unlock a bit more cash. Part of the process, sometimes again it's that lack of information, it's the kind of meeting the needs, you want to get people in the right room. This one's a challenging one. Public service. Now, we already said that it's basically taxpayers funded. And there's very much a mentality that because of that, really, there's a duty there put upon scientists to sort of jump to deliver whatever the government requires. Because it's taxpayers funded, they're taxpayers funded, we should all work together in a sort of glorious sort of a whole and answer these problems. Unfortunately, the policymakers tend to forget that universities are commercial entities and are driven by different objectives. Scientists may be perfectly willing to, but their employers probably less so. And this has led to, over every year, extra expectations put upon academics. Not only do you have to be an educator, a researcher, a communicator, an innovator, an ambassador, a champion, an entrepreneur, an influencer, a public spokesman, a driver of change. Every year, because the academics are funded by the taxpayer, they're expected to do more and more and more. It's simply impossible. But then that's what the other side of the equation is looking at. They're expecting someone to pick up the slack, and it falls on the academics, and it's simply not doable. But the thinking is out there. So, with that in mind, how do we go about sort of engaging with policy? Well, collaborating, authorising reports. Great, you've got a report, but unless you're actually driving it into the hands of someone, it's close to worthless. Unless you're taking the extra mile, and I think that was the point Henry was making very kind of strongly, that you've got to make sure that the right message is getting in the right hands. A large report is going to achieve very, very little. It'll be great for science, but if it can't be boiled down into something that someone can pick up and use, whether by you, whether by someone else that you're working with, then it's really going to have little value. So yeah, publications are great. It's great for the ref, for papers, but really if you're going to make a difference, it's got to be in the language that the people can use. You've got to be able to follow up on that as well. You've got to be ready for the call. Should someone say, oh, this report landed on my desk, I want to find out more about that, I want to know more. Roundtables, conferences, I think Bridget made the point again that at a conference, best of all in the world, people are going to take away 3 things from any presentation they see. If you're lucky, that'll be your name and your institute, leaving them probably maybe what you were wearing, or perhaps a core message from your research. So really yes, presentations are important, but we don't need 25-minute presentations. We don't need half-an-hour presentations on a subject. Most of them can be delivered in 5 slides. I have probably 6 slides here, so I'm shooting myself slightly in the foot by going over that limitation. But that's it. Fundamentally, conferences are great for getting information out there, but it's slow. It is very, very slow. It's not doing the job. You've got to go the extra distance. Discussions with civil servants. Again, I think Bridget covered this quite well. It is mostly about trying to find the right people. In most cases, the people within the civil service don't know who the right people are. They don't talk to themselves. They're equally siloed. They all have competing agendas. Briefs get shifted around left, right, and centre. So finding the right people for that particular moment that you're looking for to make a change is incredibly difficult. And then the next time or the next discussion, it won't be the same people, or this discussion will have moved on. It will have moved from information gathering into implementation, into delivery, into review. And these are all going to be different people. So you have to always know that organisation better than it knows itself. Again, I'm just saying that's probably somewhat impossible, as well as doing all the research and doing everything else you have to do. Formal relationships, now that would be great. Not something we do particularly well in the UK, sadly. I think yes, you can get invited to committees, you can get invited to other things, but there's not really a national laboratory in most of these disciplines. Certainly in energy, I think we're the closest thing there is to national laboratory, and we are doing an appallingly bad job at that. If I look at my colleagues across the various countries and look at their national laboratories and the way they're set up, I'm positively envious. But there are ways and means, and we are trying to encourage the policymakers to try and come up with more formal relationships. Because again, you're not incentivised by your institutes to engage at that sort of level. Yes, you are by the funders, but day to day, the policymakers don't appreciate that you've got other priorities other than responding to their calls. We're trying to say to them, if you want people to provide the information, and if you want to provide them independently, they've got to be incentivised in a way that they understand and can work with. And we're starting to have, a little bit of a movement on that front. So multi-level interactions. So yes, I mean, again, we operate at the Westminster. We have some discussions with the Welsh Assembly. We do quite a lot of work in Scotland. No connection. But fundamentally, we're out there. We're giving them the time they need and sort of making that sort of relationship work at all the various levels, because they all have, and I think again, point well made by Bridget. They all have different ways of operating. Again, a point very well made by sort of Graham this morning. They all have different ways of operating and different systems in place, and it's definitely not one size fits all. If you are trying to do something across the UK, then you're going to have at least 4 different groups in each of those areas. You're talking about 16 sort of different groups to be engaging with. It's a hell of a lot of work to sort of get that information out there. And that's just delivering the information. If you're then trying to make a change in the back of that, other people get involved and engaged. So I think I probably have touched on this as we've gone through. What is the trouble? Again, so effective communication. Talked about that. Sort of large reports which are basically saying more research is needed. I mean, we do that. It's difficult to get out of the mindset of doing that. Policymakers hate it. They laugh about it. It's not something they enjoy seeing. They're really looking for most times for recommendations, and that's it. They know more research is needed because it's not solved. It doesn't need to be written down there in the kind of the paperwork for that to happen. Managing expectations, deadlines. Again, this has been talked over quite a lot. Really, they want an answer, and they want the answer yesterday, and they want an answer. I mean, they aren't after, in a lot of cases, a long discussion. And this is, sometimes an anathema in the way that we operate. I mean, we are scientists. We deal with nuance. We deal with flexibility, with kind of exactitude. And in most cases, policymakers have an agenda that they are trying to deliver. Not necessarily their agenda, but an agenda that's been put upon them by some other group, whether that be a committee or an MP, and then obviously they have been informed by another group, whether that be special kind of advisors or particular people whispering in their ear, and they're coming from the media, and they're informed by sort of the people. So really, at each stage, you can't deal with all of that. So just deal with the question that's in front of you. Yeah. So I think we've discussed that one. Again, formal lesson for formal relationships. This is the kind of fundamental challenge. You've given up the time to do these things and sometimes not getting the value. But really, you've got to start building that relationship with the policymakers and sort of have that point of view where they can come to you and trust you as a particular individual. And one of the reasons for that is that sort of, the numbers don't make sense either. You're incentivised by the research councils to go out to policymakers, encourage them to sort of take on board your research. But there's probably, this is just one small meeting in sort of one part of the world, part of the UK. But if each of you was to rush off to DEC, or I know you're not all going to go into energy, but if you were going to do that, they'd be swamped. There's not enough of them. And that's what they're being asked. You're being asked to do as academics: is go out there, chase these people down, and inform them, give them the information. I mean, there's just too many of you and not enough of them. And then so really the best plan is try and sort of create some sort of critical mass. And we've had some sort of value through the likes of the European Energy Research Alliance with this. Is that coming together, trying to create as close to a single voice as you can really kind of work wonders. They came up with a strategy of investment to target the key areas in ocean energy, and that then pretty much got put into the sort of the work programme for the Horizon 2020. And again, that's coming together, single voice, just trying to put away all of the institutional drivers and coming up with a single thing. Incredibly difficult to do, and I think Ocean Energy could do it because they were a fairly small grouping, but really sometimes that's what's required. I mean, again, the other part of the numbers thing is that sort of it's really a location game as well. I mean, you just need to look at sort of again, I think sort of Graham talked about this, that people are invited to give evidence, but really 80% of the academics called to give evidence only come from less than 15% of the UK universities. The policymakers will not go far. I mean, yes, they will use Google, yes, they will try and do those sorts of things, but really they're not going to go out of their way to get that information. It has to come to them, it has to be delivered to them. But the good news is that they want that information. They are looking for new voices, they are looking for not the same people. I mean, the message we're constantly getting from the likes of Go Science and Bayes is that, you know, we're wanting the expertise, we're wanting the new ideas, and we've seen all these people before. We want a kind of a broader discussion. We want to get the stakeholders in the room. So you're not pushing, you know, something uphill against a real struggle. You know, if you can make sure your message is ready for them, they are wanting to hear it and they're open to that. That's one of the few positive messages that I think I'm probably going to try and give in this. And I think that one of the reasons for that is that, sort of, yeah, and again, you know, there's too many. I've got 5 minutes of it, or I'm doing really well. I don't know. Is this? So yeah. So I really, and I think this was the point that was made, is that sort of, you know, there are too many people who are close to government who convince them that they know what they're talking about on everything, and sort of who are whispering in the ears. Again, it's the idea about evidence. Yes, there is the evidence base. Yes, that gets used. But equally, in that long process of public to policymaker, there's lots of whispering in the ears. There's lots of people who, you know, you will know, they're amongst your community, that sit on various committees and sit in all the various committees, and sort of stuff comes from, you know, from somewhere which isn't necessarily informed by the evidence base. So the policymakers are aware of that. They don't like it, but, you know, it's the way that things are driven. So they're quite keen to look for a broader representation in those audiences. So, strategies to quickly go through this. So, I think we've talked through this. Policymakers are knowledgeable, yeah? They're not daft. They are intelligent people, so talk to them like they're intelligent people. They're going to be as busy as all of us are. They are looking at multiple goals. If they're giving you some time, they're keen to know what you want, but don't waste that time. I think this is the kind of key one coming from me, because I mean, I'm not an academic. I'm really coming to this from the point of view of someone who sits trying to create these bridges between the two groups. Sort of, if you're not training engagement, if you don't have the time, don't try. There's bound to be someone out there, either within your institute or within your network or some other grouping, that can help you do this. You know, and if you can't get them interested in it, then you've probably got to have a good, strong, hard look at your research, because I mean, their job is pretty much to try and get the best value from their institutes. But yeah, I mean, there are people out there who are paid to do this. Get them involved. And also, one of the worst things, and we fall for this one as well, is that when you get asked the question, don't reframe it. Don't sort of say, well, that's not the question you should be asking. I mean, I know it comes easily sometimes, because it's thinking, why are they asking that? It's a stupid question. We've all done it, but don't do that. I mean, if they're doing it for a good reason, they know that sometimes it's not their answer. What they are looking for is an answer, and they will move on with that discussion. It may not be with you, it may be with someone else, but don't try and reframe that. So, quickly ending on the lessons learned. Yes, there is a desperate need for independent expertise from decision makers. You know, so if you're really wanting to stand out, you've got to put away all your preconceptions and your lobbying and everything else, and just make yourself an honest broker. It's incredibly difficult to do because you're paid by someone, and that's always going to frame the way you approach things. But really, that will get you a long way. If you can put that stuff behind you, you'll find that doors will open. And also, you know, it's not easy. I mean, again, the pressures on you are always going to be there to sort of, you know, to be competitive and drive more business in towards your institutes and various other things. And also, you're up against the whispering in the ear. But there are definitely benefits, and I think Bridget touched on those. So really, thank you very much. I was obviously setting this up for the panel discussion, and I will stop at this point.